Hello, welcome to this Halion 6 tutorial video series. Today we're talking about filters. Now the filter section, we're in a zone here. If we just bring this across for a moment. Clicked on a zone and we've gone to the zone tab, and in the filter section here the filter is currently off. This filter applies to not only synth zones but granular, wavetable and sampler synths as well. So all of this is going to be very common across the application. Let's turn it on. Got all these different filter types and we'll deal with each of them in turn, but for now let's just stick with the classic. When we turn it on we get a filter type. You see filter shape A, and this is an LP24 low pass 24 decibels per octave filter. And if we set everything to completely normal, that's like absolutely standard, hearing the whole sound. So we bring the cutoff down, you see those high frequencies attenuated. If I then increase the resonance at 1.4 kilohertz, we'll see a resonance spike. And there it is. That there is the filter bank self-oscillating. Basically there's so much feedback being sent in. Resonance is all about feedback. So much being sent in that it generates overtones. These are all the different filter types we've got. Now 24 decibels per octave basically means that for every octave past the cutoff frequency we go, we're going to attenuate the signal by 24 decibels. And that means that the further away you go, it dramatically attenuates the sound. So starting from a perspective of having all the frequencies, just take the resonance away. The slope of the curve here is quite steep. If I turn that to an 18 decibels per octave filter, we'll get a shallower slope. Shallower still, because less stuff is being thrown away. We're only throwing 12 decibels per octave away now. And then finally the shallowest of all. Band pass filter allows frequencies at and around the cutoff through and throws everything else away. Again, we can generate resonance around 1.4k, there or thereabouts. And if we make it a 24 decibels curve, it's steeper on both sides. The attenuation is more dramatic on both sides of the frequency cutoff. I have a problem with the word cutoff. I would rather it be something like focal point, because when you're dealing with low pass filters and high pass filters, it's great to say, you know, we're cutting off all of the other frequencies. But when you're dealing with stuff that's sculpting around a particular point, then cutoff doesn't feel quite right to me, but it is globally used, it is the word, so I just have to accept it. But in the case of the bandpass filter, we're not cutting anything off, we're sculpting away on both sides. Then we get some combinations of filters that should be relatively straightforward. Let's jump over here for the high pass filters first. So, no sound. We're cutting away all of the low sounds up to 22 kilohertz, which basically means we've got nothing left. As we reduce this value, then we start to introduce the high frequencies. So here, our cutoff point is 800 hertz, which is around here, and then this is the attenuation curve. So if I switch to a 12 decibels per octave scale, then we'll get a shallower curve and we'll hear more of those low tones. And there they are. And 6 at the shallowest, where we're letting the most stuff through. And then having dealt with high pass, we can obviously, you know, pretty easily figure out we're going to get two different filters here. A high pass filter cutting the low stuff away, and a low pass filter cutting the high stuff away. So that's similar, that's basically a band pass filter, but we've got different levels of attenuation on either side of the curve, and that's why it's specified that way. So you could say that a bandpass 24 is an LP24 plus HP24. Band reject is basically a notch filter. It's the opposite of a bandpass filter. So let's hear it. So we're sculpting out a notch in the frequency curve at 1.8, which is there. So there's the center of our notch. If we have a 12 decibels per octave band reject filter, then we'll have a shallower V. We're letting more frequency through, and the curve shallows out. All pass is an odd one. All pass filter usually means let everything through, and they're generally used when dealing with phasing issues. But here it's not. It's actually a filter that has like a one-sided notch on it. It's got an 18 decibels per octave attenuation around the cutoff, but only in one direction, only to the right. So here you see it looks like a notch filter. If the cutoff knob was set to like 3 kilohertz, then you would call it a notch filter. But the cutoff is actually set to 1670, which is all the way over here. So you can see that it's letting all the low stuff through, and then it's got this hard chop, 18 decibels per octave, which is pretty steep, attenuation of the upper frequencies, and then it just lets go, and then lets the frequencies back through again, and we get this stuff over here. So if we add that to a low pass filter, then we get the same thing, but now we've also thrown these high frequencies away over here. Tube drive is basically that, except you've got the option to add distortion to the sound as well. So a tube drive with 0 distortion and a classic drive are essentially identical. It looks like there's a tiny difference in the algorithm. Tube drive seems to be just attenuating all the frequencies a little, but to all intents and purposes they're the same. Then when we bring distortion in, we're going to introduce loads of extra new harmonics. Here they come. Next up, hard clip. So this gives you a really bright kind of transistor amp sound. Again, we're using distortion, so we started off with the same basic sound, and then it quickly gets nasty. Bit reduction introduces what's called quantization noise, which is basically by reducing the bit rate of the signal, we raise the noise floor. We just introduce distortion across the entire range. You'll see it. Very quickly becomes nasty. And rate reduction is the other nasty thing we can do to audio. We can reduce its bit rate and we can reduce its sampling rate. And this is basically aliasing. This is what aliasing is. So as we introduce distortion, in other words, reduce the sampling rate, that's what's happening, then this stuff that's coming in from the right hand side is known as aliasing. The algorithm that's taking photographs of the audio can't take photographs accurately enough for it to properly draw the waveform anymore. It just starts getting it wrong. It's a really fascinating subject. I'll do a video on aliasing at some point, but that's what we're getting with rate reduction. Rate reduction KF. KF stands for key follow. So basically, the higher up the keyboard, you'll retain more of your original signal, and lower down it'll throw more stuff away. So it's basically just applying the key follow shape to your bit reduction. I have to confess I don't use the Halion 3 and Waldorf options. So Halion 3 is like a legacy filter. You get this like fatness control, which is supposed to add like a tube distortion, but you can see it's not actually adding many frequencies to it. It does seem to be attenuating the sound. As I pull it back, it lets more stuff through. Waldorf has some comb filters in it, and there's a pretty straightforward comb filter. Again, that just warms it up, just reduces some of those distorted frequencies. Eco is just economy mode. It throws away resonance and distortion, but still gives you all of your same filter settings. And then in addition to all of those filter types, I mean, this is just classic Halion. We've got all of these different options of how to combine filter types together. So all of that was dealing with a single filter, and that's why we saw this bottom row, filter shape A, populated. If we turn it into dual filter, we now get two different filters that we can apply to the same sound at the same time. In addition, we now get our morph pad, where we get to mess with the cutoff and resonance in XY manner. So this is in serial, then we've got the same kind of thing but in parallel. So they're now side by side. Next down we've got morphability, so we can basically dynamically modulate between filters A and B. So that's the band reject filter, and there, when I move X and Y, I'm controlling the cutoff of the filter. You can see the band reject, notch filter, and then as I go up, I turn it into a low pass filter, and now cutoff is dealing with the low pass filters effect, and then we can morph between them to get both of those. In morph 4 we get to morph between 4 different types of filter: band reject, low pass filter, high pass filter, all pass filter. And finally, morph XY, you can see it's put the 4 filters around the corners. We get to XY around them. When we have more than one filter engaged at any given time, we can offset the cutoff frequency, CF offset. So now filter B has an offset higher by 13% than filter A. And same with the resonance offset. A different resonance for the 2 different filters. Cutoff velocity modulates our envelope according to how hard we hit the key. Switch back to a more simple filter. So okay, there's our filter. Doesn't matter how hard I hit the key, getting the same filter. I increase this. There's a soft key. There's a hard key. This normalization velocity, we don't really have a zone set up complicated enough to do this, but basically what you're going to get here is if you've got a zone so that the individual note that you're playing only occupies a velocity range of say 0 to 40, then by normalizing, you take that 0 to 40 range and spread it across the whole velocity range that Halion has on offer. So it doesn't matter where in the multi-key mapping you are, every filter is going to apply across the entire range, so you won't get these strange situations where a sound that's being played at 40 and at the upper limit of its filter sounds dramatically different to a sound that's being played at 41, so it's a different sample right at the very bottom of its filter. You know, that it compensates for that effect of having multiple samples or multiple sounds for a single key, depending on velocity layers. Envelope amount lets us bring the filter envelope into the equation. So for the last couple of episodes we've been talking about envelopes a fair amount, and now we get to talk about the filter envelope. So if I make a really simple filter, got a big sweep on it like that, at the moment it's having no effect on the sound. Now if I introduce the envelope amount, see it filtering those high frequencies away. And obviously, as per envelopes, we can get as crazy as we like. And finally, key follow tracks the keyboard. So at 0%, there's no key follow. Every key has the same filter shape applied to it. But if we introduce key follow, now the higher notes will have a higher cutoff. So I'll play a C5. Got 7 harmonics there. Same note. Fewer harmonics. By raising the cutoff, we're letting more signal through because this is a low-pass filter. And that's the filter bank. Fantastically flexible, really, really powerful. It's an absolute monster. Don't forget how awesome the env amount knob is to be able to tie in to your filter envelope over here and get really creative with the shapes that you can sculpt with your sounds rather than, you know, straightforward decibels per octave filters. Hope you enjoyed that one. Thanks very much for watching, and hope to see you next time.